Hey everyone, you're listening to Party Time, My Golf Story with Kevin Walsh and whatever special guest he has today. You can check me out on episode 9 of the podcast. Today I'm wearing Grayson clothes while I'm out practicing because I believe in look good, play good. And follow me on Instagram, Sophia Warren Golf, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers. And the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com. Now here's your host, Kevin Walsh.
Hey, welcome to the program. As promised, if you watched the last episode of It's Party Time, My Golf Story, our guest was John Reilly. He is the author of A Will to Win, which is the story of Philadelphia legendary amateur golfer Big Bill Hyman III. We had so much fun with that. We had to stop it. So he graciously said, well, let's just do 2 parts, or I suggested that, and he was good with that. Now, the previous week, we had on King Hyman, William Hyman V, who is the CEO of the First Tee of Greater Philadelphia and the grandson of Big Bill Hyman III. So if you want a little perspective, we can pick up here. It'll be fascinating as it is. But if you want a little bit of the backstory, go back and watch last week and the week before, because this all leads up to, sets this up real nice to put a bow on this as we get closer and closer to Father's Day, because A Will to Win, the story of Big Bill Hyman, one of golf's greatest amateurs. I think it make a really good Father's Day gift. Big thanks to our title sponsor, Party Drinks. If you're looking for an alternative beverage on the golf course, if that's something you do, and you're a little tired of a drink that's named after a time of day or White Claw or beer or whatever it is, try a Party. I think you'll really like it. For a list of different places, it's scrolling across the bottom of your screen, or will be. And also the golf real estate pros of Vince Visicaro and Gene Walsh. If your dream is to live in golf paradise, the southwest coast of Florida, especially the Sarasota area, nobody better than Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro and Lakewood National, where we're broadcasting from. That is probably the best place for you. 2 Arnold Palmer design golf courses, and we've been talking about Arnold Palmer with John Reilly in part 1, and now it's time for part 2. Hey, John, I really appreciate you coming back for a second edition, because I felt like we were just kind of scratching the surface, but we left off in where we were talking about Big Bill Hyman, Walker Cups, and his relationship with Lanny Watkins, who was the cockiest golfer in the world as an amateur and probably as a pro. But the old man took him down. And by his own admission, he's like, what can I do? He just played better golf than me. Habits and quirks of Mr. Hyman. We talked in episode number 1 where he called you son, he called me son, he called everybody son. But he had different expressions for the shots that he hit, for different things. I'd like to hear some of the quirks that you knew about, and then I'm going to share some that I knew personally.
Yeah, I mean, he, I don't think so much of regular expressions, but some of the things, that he said when he described what he experienced or what he had done, that stuck with me. For instance, in the 1959 Walker Cup, and that was the team with Nicklaus and Beeman and Harvey Ward, that still, I think, a lot of people consider to be the greatest Walker Cup team of all time. And that was really back in the day, when you had career amateurs who played for these teams. I mean, even Beeman and Nicklaus at that time were planning to remain amateur. So anyway, his partner in the alternate shot was Tommy Aaron. And Tommy Aaron was runner-up, I guess, that year in the National Amateur. And he was worried about Aaron leaving him in the rough on the last hole at Muirfield, and he convinced him to hit a 4-wood. And Aaron, said, Bill, I'm concerned about leaving you that far back. And he said, you get it in the fairway, I'll get it on the green. And he talked about, like when he hit the 2-iron into that green, he said, I won't ever forget that shot if I live to be a million. And, he had a few of those that, that he would, that he expressed at different times.
Tell the one about first baseman in the Masters on the 12th hole, how well he struck the ball and what he said.
So that was a great story. He explained in his oral history of the USGA that he meets his caddy and he asks his caddy, what his name is. He says, my name's first baseman. And he says, well, what's your real name? And he says, first baseman. So anyway, he was playing with Tommy Bolt that day. He gets to the 12th. Bolt had missed a short putt on 11. And apparently he clanged the flag with his putter. And of course, Bolt, as everybody knew, he had a terrible temper and reputation. And he gets up to the tee on 12, and he says, first baseman, he says, I think it's a 7-iron. First baseman says, no, I don't think so, Mr. Hyman. I think you got to hit 6 because the wind's swirling. And so Bill always seemed to take his caddy's advice, and he took out the 6-iron. He said, I hit it so good, it felt like it stuck to the face.
Stuck to the face. Love it.
Stuck to the face. He said, and it took one hop and just sucked back right into the hole. And he said, Tommy Bolt didn't say a thing. He said, we were walking to the 13th tee. And Bolt said, Tommy, Billy, that was a fine shot you hit there. And they ended up going to the bar afterwards, and Bolt did true confessions to him, explained to him he wasn't really a bad guy. And so Bolt was a character.
I heard that story. Mr. Hyman told that story. He was a guest speaker at the Linwood Hall Challenge Cup at Huntington Valley. I played in it when I was in college. And he told that story about first baseman. Didn't use the stuck to the face thing, but when first baseman said 6-iron, he said, nah, that's too much. He said, nope, yeah, you got to get it all. And he hit it, stuck to the face, went in the hole. That's a good one. All right. So the glasses thing. Why don't you tell the story about reaching in the pocket with the glasses?
So I never knew this about Hyman, but as his eyesight started to get bad as he got older, like when he was playing his senior golf, he couldn't follow the ball, couldn't see it land. So he started carrying his glasses with him, and he would put the glasses in his back right pocket. And he would hit the ball, and while the ball was in the air, he would whip the glasses out and put them on. And I had not heard the story until I was at a function one day with a guy by the name of Blaze DeRosa, won the Delaware Amateur about 10
Oh, yes.
Blaze was one hell of a player. And he said, yeah, he says, I played with Hyman. And he proceeds to tell me the glasses story. But he said, he says, I think that was gamesmanship, because he would hit that drive, whip out the glasses, and every time he'd say, where did it go? And basically I would answer, went down the middle. He said, then he would hit it in the rough and he wouldn't say anything. He said, he just put the glasses on and follow it. So, yeah.
I can confirm that. Okay. Not the Blaze thing, but the glasses whipping. He did it so fast because he did it when I played with him, and he'd always say, where did it go? And it was almost always in the fairway because he hit it so pure. But here's one I don't know if you know this one. Well, there were times that he was having trouble picking up the ball. He's like, where'd that go? He's like, that was a big old cut, wasn't it? I'm like, nah, Mr. Hyman, it was actually a little baby draw. You're in the first cut, just off the fairway. He's like, nah, that was a big old cut. Cutty Sark. And I'm like, Cutty Sark? I'm like, I didn't know what that meant. I know what it is now, but that it's a fine whiskey, isn't it?
That's right. A Scotch, right?
A Scotch. Yeah. Well, it was a drink. I was 15. I wasn't quite there yet. I need another year.
Yeah, I can remember hearing that a little bit when I was young. And so that another quirk he had was, again, his older years was he would reach across his body with his left hand to shake hands with you. And he would say, "Excuse my left hand." And, a couple things on that. Back to the glasses for a second. As I say, I had heard Blaze explain the story to me in the early days of working on the book. But then, it ended up becoming a part of the story when he won his second U.S. Senior Amateur at Crooked Stick, and it was covered a bit in the papers out in Indiana. But the other thing was this handshaking routine that he did, and I tried to track that down, and what happened, because I never, in all the research I was doing, I never could find anything on a hand injury. And what I learned was that apparently, I think it was at the seniors tournament down at Atlantic City Country Club when the senior tour came here back in the probably around 1980. May have been 1980 when he played in the first U.S. Senior Open. And he met Willie Mays. And apparently Mays basically crushed his hand when he shook hands with him. One of the two of them was really excited, and somehow or other, it injured his hand, and he became afraid, to shake hands with that hand for fear of injuring it again. And that was what, created this reach across the body left hand.
I didn't know that, but he's not the only one. I think Chichi Rodriguez has a similar story, because when he would shake your hand, he would give you the dead fish because he didn't want you putting any tension. Like sometimes men will meet each other's tension on a handshake.
Right.
I don't know if they're connected, but I didn't know that story. That's interesting. You mentioned Jay Siegel. When I knew Mr. Hyman as, he was still shooting below his age when I knew him, because I met him in 1983, and I think he was fresh off his first U.S. Senior Amateur win.
Second one, 83.
Okay, there you go.
First one was 73.
And Jay Siegel was winning his U.S. Amateurs at the time, and he was a little closer in age. So what was their relationship like?
It's funny. Obviously, I never talked to Bill about that relationship, but I talked fairly extensively with Jay about it. And, it certainly sounded like it was cordial. Jay said they really didn't play each other head to head much. I didn't get any sense that it was warm in any of the, things that Jay said or talked about. He said that he actually was friendly with Bucky and played more golf with Bucky, his son, Bill's son, Bucky. So, and obviously they were more contemporaries than Bill and Jay were, but they had a rivalry. I think it was more than Jay thought. I called Jay when I had finished the draft of the book, or I sent him an email, and I said, Jay, I don't know if you want to go over this, but your name is in the book 64 times. And he said, I need to read it. Get it to me. So anyway, I ended up making a copy of all of it and binding it and sending it to Jay, and got his feedback on the book. And, one of the things he said, which is now on the front cover of the book, he said, I really didn't know Bill Hyman, but it's really interesting. I think he was a bit surprised by the encounters, some of the similarities between their careers. I mean, for instance, they both had kind of a delayed start at national competition. Dean Beeman talked about Hyman, and he said it was like he experienced his career in reverse, because he said most of us, went out and played our best golf, and then we went and we began our business careers. He said, Bill Hyman did the opposite. Well, Jay was a little bit the same way. Both of them were kind of delayed by trying to raise their families, by getting established in business. Jay was delayed by his serious injury in college. Bill by, golf kind of shut down during the war years. He didn't have the kind of job where he could play a lot. So anyway, they had similarities that I don't think Jay had ever given real consideration to before. But Jay was the first person to read the book in its entirety.
That's interesting. And what he told you, I thought I knew Bill Hyman, but I really didn't know him. That's why I love biographies, especially of people that I think I know, because the author has more time to take the deeper dive. And I want to like fact check, not so much your book. Well, yes, your book, of course. I mean, that's why I'm looking forward to it. But other biographies, I'm like, I saw him in a little different life, or that adds to what I thought I knew about it. It kind of like colors in the lines and it fills in the blanks. You talked about World War II, and as much as we talk about the glory years of Big Bill, there was some real suffering back in his younger years. There was real tragedy in his life which could have derailed the upward trajectory, correct?
Oh, I think I honestly believe that Bill Hyman had more heartache in his life than almost any of us have to experience in our lives. Thank God. And we've all had some. Nobody gets a free pass in life. But, maybe that's what moved Jay a little bit in terms of I didn't know him. Bill Hyman's father died when he was 14. He adored his father. Then his brother's only 7. And he ends up basically raising his little brother, Tommy. And he and it's just the three of them, Bill and Tommy and his mother, for about 4 years. She eventually remarries a doctor in Abington. And, things get better for them. But by then, Bill's the adult in the house as far as his brother is concerned. Bill was a leader in high school, and he was captain of the basketball team. He was just outstanding in every way. And along comes Tommy, and he is an absolute duplicate of Bill. He wins the Philadelphia Interscholastic Championship in golf 3 times. He would have won it the other year, but he was disqualified because he got recruited to play for North Hills in a Suburban League match. And they found out about it, and they disqualified him from playing in the Interscholastic Championship that year. He was a great high school pitcher. He was excellent on the basketball court. The A's were scouting and recruiting Tommy to pitch for them. And of course, along comes the war. Bill gets married in 37, end of 37, I guess it is. He and Ginny actually eloped, by the way. A lot of people, I don't think, know that. And she was a little older than he was. So they eloped. They had their first child, Patsy Jane, in 1939. Patsy Jane in 41, before Pearl Harbor, she comes down with bone cancer. Basically suffers for 7 months. There was nothing they could do for her. And Bill and Jenny lose their first child. Tommy, his kid brother, is living with him. He registers for the draft. He goes off to become a pilot. 1 year later, he gets killed in a crash just before getting his flight wings. These are just terrible tragedies. His mother died a few years later. His poor mother, she lived with so much heartache. As I say, the war's going on. He's working in a defense plant. These were not easy times. But I actually compare him to Harvey Ward in the book. Harvey, who of course beats him in '55 for the National Amateur Championship. The the story on Harvey was that, he just fell apart when he lost his amateur status, began drinking, lost his marriage. I mean, Bill was just the opposite. If anything, it seemed to drive he and Jenny closer. He had a strong faith. He just was just an exemplary person and citizen in every single way. And, even into his job, I interviewed people that he worked for him and with him. And they just said, Bill and his family, the Hymans, they were just people that you wanted to be around every day.
That's who they were. They're just really good people. And as much as we talk about his success, he had a lot of heartache competitively too. He had a string of losses in national finals and in major amateur events that forced him to retool how he went about playing golf, about the mental side of the game. What was that? Walk me through it.
I didn't, make any attempt to psychoanalyze him, but my own sense was that all of this, really took a toll on him. And, you begin, when you go through things like this in your life, you begin to feel very vulnerable. All of a sudden you realize there's all these uncontrollable elements in life that can come at you at any time. I think that Hyman just, I think it really impacted him. I think it carried over to his golf, that maybe things just weren't going to have a good ending. And he just kept getting knocked off, in these big events, beginning with the national amateur. Everybody, tried to psychoanalyze him a little bit, I think. Even in the beginning, Jay Wood Platt, when he was younger, said Billy Hyman, thinks he was born with the wind against him. Others said that he lacked, Bill Campbell, the great amateur, said he lacked basic confidence. He just was filled with self-doubt, and it was a fight for him to try to overcome that. And time after time, he loses in the finals of 4 national championships, and he lost in the finals of other big tournaments, a couple times in the North-South, 3 times in the North-South. He did eventually win the North-South. But he was plagued by this kind of doubt, and what was amazing about Bill Hyman is he never gave up, and he worked hard on trying to fix that part. I think in the beginning he just concentrated kind of on the physical side of the game, where he literally hit hundreds of thousands of golf balls. He worked on staying in shape, he quit smoking, he quit drinking. He did everything in a direction of trying to be the best golfer he could be, and to win a national championship. So, but he worked hard on the mental side. He became a devotee of Norman Vincent Peale. In fact, he carried Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking, with him when he traveled. He read and reread it all the time. I think that King may still have the book, all dog-eared from all the years he carried it.
I bet he does. And King told me the story when he would go visit his grandfather at Adios. He would see his grandfather sitting out on the lanai, and he would just be sitting there very stoically and wouldn't move. And King asked his grandmother, what's he doing out there? And she said, he's meditating. And I think he actually seemed to pick that up from Rickover, I think it was, the military hero. And it was connected back to Peale. But also, I think Henry James, he read a lot about the mind and how to control his emotions. And he worked very, very hard on it. Meditation was a very important part of that to him. Between rounds, he in the national senior, he didn't really have any place to go. He laid down on a bench in the locker room and would meditate between rounds.
In fact, two of those rounds, you can imagine in senior golf, were 2 rounds a day. And that was the sort of thing he would do to try to train his mind in addition to his body.
Well, he did it great. And can you imagine, like, well, he was an older man. Can you imagine seeing an older man laying down on a bench in a locker room in between? Somebody might think that there's a health problem going on there, right?
What happened to that?
What's going on there? Only he knows. There are a couple of stories that I'm somewhat familiar with. I want to get in. I want to drill down a little bit because you're talking to an author. I've written 3 books, and sometimes there are editorial disagreements or challenges that must be overcome. What stays in the book and what is removed from the book. What is the Weeping Willie story?
So, it's interesting. I never knew anything about that. And as I interviewed people, several people would comment on this Weeping Willie or the Weeper. And where I really got into it were the interviews I did with both Vinnie Giles and Dick Sidoroff. Obviously, great amateurs, great national amateurs. Sidoroff won, 2 British amateurs? Vinnie Giles, one of the best records in the history of the U.S. amateur, runner-up 3 times and won it once. And they played a lot of golf and a lot of competition with Bill, and they played a number of Masters and Opens and others with him. And some of the stories actually came out of the Masters, but the way Giles described it was that, he would beat you to the punch with his complaints. Bill Campbell talked about that too, the great amateur. Giles told one story where they arrived, I think, to qualify for a tournament. And he said he was so sick and he had hurt himself and he was so sick. He said he wasn't sure whether he was going to play or not. He said, he said, I'm halfway down the first fairway, and I had spent the whole time listening to Bill's health complaints. He said, I'm ready to die, and Bill's telling me all his health complaints. And honestly, Bill he was accident prone. He missed the Masters one year because he came tumbling down the stairs at coming out of a high school basketball game. He really had some injuries, and he had a chronic back problem. When he played in the Open,
oh yes, I knew about the back.
But he was all taped up, his whole body, and swallowing painkillers, and that's in the middle of the massacre at Wingfoot. So he got that reputation. I concluded, first of all, what fascinated me, but every caddy that I talked to confirmed this, that he never said a curse word on the golf course, never took the Lord's name in vain, never a foul word, never happened. And that's kind of the way he lived his life. I became kind of convinced that was, some people just do that. It just happens automatically. And I think maybe his talking about his health issues was a little bit, a release for him that, you and I may have a few choice words to say when we miss a putt.
Oh, yeah. That's his own therapy. I think the whole thing about profanity, like my parents, I grew up in a profanity-free house, but I think it's language. In fact, there's a book called The Wisdom of Profanity, which says, my parents used to say, those are the words of unintelligent people. The research concludes that intelligent people use profanity just as much and sometimes more. And when you use it in a proper context, if that makes any sense at all, it shows a closeness. If you pull somebody in closely and say, hey, look, we can't F this up, they mean business, okay? And then now it's a tribal, it's a closeness thing. The gambling. Let's get into I was witness to a couple wagers on the golf course. I wouldn't say it wasn't big stakes, not that I saw, but King tells me that his as he called his grandfather, really liked the action. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
It's true, and I don't know if his daughter would mind me saying this. She anyway. she said to me one day when I was talking to her, she said, my father would bet on snow in July. So it's funny because it was sort of like his one guilty pleasure. I mean, the guy was he just was, exemplary in his conduct and giving back to the community and active in his church. But he owned several racehorses. He was active at the track. In fact, he had a couple successful horses. That was a big thing between Bill and his daughter, and Faith and Jenny and Bill would go to the track together. He taught her how to read the racing form and how to place a bet. And but I think he liked the action on the golf course more than anywhere. And I think for him, it was just so natural. I mean, everybody was that way back in the day. And for some, it was how they supplemented their income. I mean, others were hustlers. This was the fairest guy in the world. I mean, he wasn't hustling. He wasn't doing anything, but I think it helped his concentration on the golf course. I think he always wanted every shot to count. He played a lot of tournaments. He wanted every shot to count. And even if he was out with the kids, he would put a couple of bucks on it. And there were some funny stories along the way of all that.
Yeah, I think I was witness to some. I was the opposite way when I play, to make it interesting, to keep it. I get the pressure part, but I always felt like I was protecting my money and wasn't really playing golf the way I wanted to play it. Because if somebody's like in the junk and you just know you got to just make par, you may have a green light at a flagstick. I might shoot for the center of the green, but to each their own. And but including stuff like this, it gives you a context of who they are. And even if it sounds like a contrast to such a faithful and spiritual man that he was, it just presents the whole person. And that was really the goal, in addition to recording his golfing record, was to tell his story, correct?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think all of it just adds up to this guy who had a tough, challenging life, but he had a dream. It's kind of like he built himself to win a national championship, and he wasn't giving up. He had this fantastic life partner, his wife, Jenny. Had a phenomenal family, and it was like it was a team effort. I think everybody was on board. They loved it. Jenny said it. That she was never a golf widow. She went to England with them to Ryder Cup. She went to Augusta with them. The kids did. They all loved it. I remember everybody in the press around the country was interviewing her in the 1971 U.S. Amateur when all three family members played in the U.S. Amateur. I mean, the only time I think in history of the USGA that three members of the same family played in a national championship like that. Jenny was kind of the center of attention. And of course, she was split running around the golf course trying to watch all three of them play in the championship. And obviously, Dad, once again, I mean, you've heard the famous story that they would have the evening match, leaving the car in the parking lot at Huntington Valley. And whoever lost the match, the other two would go in for dinner after they played the eighth hole, and the one that lost the match had to walk down 9 and up the hill and get the car and drive it back home again.
I did not know this story. How do I not know this story?
That story was told a few times. Not only that, Tommy told it at Bill's funeral, and he ended it by saying, I don't think my dad ever made that walk. He wouldn't let him win. I don't think my dad ever made that walk. And you know how good his two kids were, right? I mean, he had to. Sure. It had to happen sometime, but he wouldn't let him win.
That's so cool. That's a good memory. Hey, in the first episode, I forgot to ask you something about Ed Porky Oliver. You spent a lot of time in his house because you were good friends with his son. Just recap that, and then we'll put a bow on Big Bill in the book, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, it's interesting that there was a connection because in the Oliver book to Heinemann, I think his name appeared like 3 times. Late in Oliver's career, before he came down with lung cancer, and just as Bill started to get out into the national scene, they played a Masters together. They didn't play with each other, but their scores were almost identical at the U.S. Open and at the Masters. And here was Oliver at the very end of his career, at the same age as Bill, whose career was just starting. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. But yeah, I grew up, I knew the Olivers from the time, from the first grade. His son, Bobby, was in my first grade class. His brother, Eddie, the older brother, Eddie, was in my brother's third grade class. They moved away for periods of time. They came back when I was in the 9th grade, and Bobby played on the high school golf team with me, and he was one of my closest friends. We actually got arrested together when we were seniors in high school, and he always
no, stop it. I want it. What happened?
It was a terrible offense. We were caught with beer at a party, and we were hiding in the bushes, and Bobby was always so cocky because no matter what happened, all he had to say was he was Porky's son, and they'd always let us off. So he says, no, I know all the cops. They'll never take us in. Don't worry about it. And we walk out on the street, and the next thing I know, the cops are throwing us in the car, arresting us. And he's got his mouth closed. He's not going to open his mouth now and say, "But my father's Porky Oliver," because his father was the most famous person in Delaware. I mean, he was just, and everybody loved him. So it was pretty special. But I didn't actually see him that much. In fact, his own kids didn't see him very often. I mean, he was on the golf tour, and he died when they were young. Johnny was only 9, and Eddie was only 17, and they had just signed him into the Navy. Eddie had his troubles. Anyway, so I do remember, though, I mean, it was pretty tragic. I remember before he died, being in the house. And I mean, these are tiny homes, little tiny home on 31st Street.
Yeah, the houses around Wilmington are small. I mean,
my God, this is a little row house, maybe 800 square feet. He's laying on the couch with his chest sliced open, obviously all stitched up, and he can barely breathe. It was shocking for me as a 14-year-old. Seeing him in that condition, and he died soon after that. He died September of 1961. And what a guy, what a character. Before he died, a reporter at that time, he went on to be the sports editor of the News Journal, went into his room, and he had just received a letter from the PGA. They named him the honorary captain of the 1961 Ryder Cup team. And it was a really nice letter. I quote from it in the book. And they invited him to come to England with the team. And Oliver said, I don't know if I'm ever going home again, and they want me to go to England. He said, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. And he said, I will tell you that I'm taking 15 pills a day. I get a shot every 2 hours, and I think they are both new PGA records.
That probably is. I love the underage beer swilling. Was the party good before you got we're hiding in the bushes and thrown in the police car? Well, I mean, was it a good party, like a memorable one aside from how it ended?
It's kind of crazy how these things happen. It was this kid whose family was building a new home in the suburbs. He invites us all up there. There are no parents there. You know what those were like in high school. The house was still under construction, and the kid that invited us up there, he ended up being the company commander of the infantry officer candidate school class right next to the company that I was going through as an officer candidate. So I'm treated almost like a prisoner of war, and he's like the king, and he's in the next, and he's not even talking to me, because I'm a grunt in the in training. But it's just funny the way life.
Oh, tell me about it. Tell me about it. That reminds me of like a legendary high school party at Abington, Arlen's party. You ask anybody, class of 88, Abington High School, about Arlen's party, they will all claim that they were there. And whenever you see Arlen, even 30 plus years later, it's like, Arlen, are you still grounded? Are you still? He was grounded for life. Hey, let's wrap it up. Tell me this, John. John is the author of A Will to Win, the story of Big Bill Hyman III. Will there ever be another great amateur like Big Bill Hyman III or Jay Siegel?
I really think that's just, kind of like the undercurrent theme of the book. I told Jay Siegel when I interviewed him, I said, Jay, you are the last amateur. Now, I mean that in the sense of career amateur like these guys were. And and I talk about Hyman in that era with Campbell, and it kind of ran from Billy Joe Patton and Charlie Coe and Campbell and Hyman up through, Vinnie Giles, Sidoroff, Jack Lewis, those great players. By then they were starting to move to the pro ranks. The guy who didn't until he was a senior, of course, was Jay Siegel. And he dominated, the amateur ranks. I mean, he really was the last of that breed in so many ways. And I just don't think you'll ever see that again. So I talk about that a little bit through the book. There's a lot of discussion of it, even in the media back in the 70s in particular, when it was really transitioning and the money got so much better as a result of Arnold Palmer and television. And pretty much everybody coming out of college that was a big golf star just went, straight on to the professional ranks to try to make their living that way.
Yeah, it just seems like that's the way to go. The money's too good to ignore, and you can almost set yourself up for life. But the life of Mr. Hyman it is a fascinating one. I can't wait to dive into the book and check back in with you again later. Maybe we can talk about it, and we can do part 3. You up for that, John?
I'm up for anything, I could talk golf all day long, but really, I mean, to me, Hyman, just like Oliver, it's a human interest story. I mean, this is just a fascinating man. I'm just a regular guy. I got to play golf with Bill Hyman, and I'm going like, this guy is a giant. And I was just glad to be in his company. And when we meet those people during the course of our life, and when they're just great people like Bill Hyman, was great to those around him. I mean, he has a quote in his oral history where he says to this guy, Joe Doyle, he says, Joe, it's just easier to be nice to people. And I think that was a great line.
That is a great line. And I remember one time he told the story where he said, I'm trying really hard to be nice. I don't know if it was Tommy Bolt or somebody else, but he said, I'm trying really hard to be nice to you. And I got to tell you something, you're not real easy to be nice to. That was the only time that I saw like just a little bit of a little stinger coming back.
It's funny how, you look, he had a great relationship with Bolt, and he had a great relationship with Sam Snead. He was great friends with Sam Snead.
So it must have been somebody else that would, but it was a name. Yeah. Oh, yeah. John, really appreciate it. I wish you all the success with A Will to Win. The book is available for pre-order right now, or by the time this airs, it could be live. awilltowin.com. He is John Reilly. He is one of the authorities on golf history in Philadelphia and Delaware. And I invite you to purchase the book because I think you'll be glad. And having known the man, Big Bill Hyman III, fascinating character. I know you'll be overjoyed to read it.
Let me add one thing.
Yeah,
Kevin.
Go ahead. Yeah.
We were having a book launch and book signing at Huntington Valley on June the 13th, Thursday, June the 13th, with Harry Donahoe of Inside Golf. He's going to moderate it, along with Jay Siegel, along with Gordon Brewer, and of course, Bill Hyman V. Probably a few other special guests.
That's going to be a great night. That's going to be a great night. Make sure you tell Mr. Brewer I said hi too. I've played a lot of golf with that man as well, and caddied for him as well. So wish you nothing but great success. So as we wrap up here, John, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Party Drinks, great drink alternative. For a list of the different places where it is sold, check out drinkparty.com. And a big thanks to our Golf Pro real estate experts, Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro from suncoastdreams.com, a division of fine properties in the greater Sarasota area. For John Reilly, I'm Kevin Walsh. We'll see you again next time on It's Party Time, My Golf Story.
Great to be with you, Kevin. Take care.
You've been listening to It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers, and the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com or call 941-220-4000.
This is Vince Visicaro and Gene Walsh with the suncoastdreams.com real estate team at Fine Properties. We've helped hundreds of families find their dream homes in golf and resort communities in Lakewood Ranch, Bradenton, Sarasota, Parrish, Venice, and the surrounding areas.
Let us be your guides to finding your dream home here as well. Learn more at suncoastdreams.com or call us at 941-220-4000.